History and Culture podcasts are a production of PCN, a nonprofit television network. Listeners like you make our programming possible. To learn more about PCN's mission and to support PCN with a donation, visit pcntv.com. This link and others can be found in our show notes. We appreciate your support.
Welcome to PCN's History and Culture podcast. I'm Phil Beckman. This podcast series features interviews exploring Pennsylvania's rich history from the colonial era to industrialization, the Gettysburg Campaign to sports history, and from art to politics and more.
Today we're speaking with Christopher Pearl, chair of the History Department at Lycoming College. Now, the walking purchase takes place in 1737. What was colonial life like at that time?
Colonial life in the 1730s is if you're thinking about the colony, of Pennsylvania and you think about its population, it's relatively small. It's clinging to really the eastern seaboard, but there are things that are changing. There's an immigration, particularly from the Irish plantations from the German provinces, and it's increasing the population in a short span of time pretty rapidly. And it's challenging the basic boundaries of what the Penns own, right? And you have to think, well, why would incoming migrants or even naturally born in the colonies, why would that change the situation? Well, a typical farm family, you just think of a middling or lower income farm family, they need about 150 acres of farmland that's just to meet what we would call competency, right? That's not making a whole bunch of money, right? That's just survival and living sort of decently. That's a very difficult thing to achieve because for two reasons in the 1730s. One is the availability of land that you can purchase legally. And two, the reason that you can't really purchase that legally has a little bit to do with the boundaries of what has been purchased by the Penn family from local native peoples like the Lenape. But it also has to do with the fact that Pennsylvania's land system benefits those with the ability to buy a host of acres together. So it benefits speculators. So you have particular people that are involved in the land office or in the Penn family in particular, like kinship connections, friendships, etc. They own just thousands and thousands of acres of land, and they're selling it at a rate to incoming migrants or others looking for it that they don't have the ability to buy, which is also putting pressures on Native American land. If you're looking at it from beyond a colonial perspective, you're looking at it from a Native American perspective. What you see in the 1730s is a steady wave of encroaching settlers, surveyors, and other government agents that are trying to consistently either purchase or remove you from the land in which you've lived in for millennia, right? And so it becomes a sort of tense decade in relationship between Native peoples and the American colonies and Pennsylvania in particular.
And how did Native Americans view land ownership?
Native Americans, they have an understanding of, obviously, the basic understanding of ownership. It's just different from the way that Europeans see it. So they have an understanding of so some of Native American understanding is what we would call usufruct, like use rights. But they also understand territorial sovereignty, that they own it as a particular clan might own a section of land, or a nation might own a section of land, or even a kinship network own a section of land. And that land has particular uses to it that you could essentially sell a portion of land for the use of it to, let's say, farm or let's say hunt. But that doesn't mean that you have a quitclaim or a fee simple right to the land that has been sold. Does that make sense? So you're selling the use of something. And so if you can explain sort of ownership in another way, for many, not all Native peoples believe this, by the way. I mean, there's a great variety in terms of the ways that different Native Americans understand ownership or conceptualize ownership. For Lenape, by and large, it is very much use oriented. So if you own a particular thing, whether that's a material object or a piece of land, because of its use. And when it's no longer useful, right, that ownership can pass to someone else, if that makes sense.
And how do Native American settlements differ from colonials?
Uh, they differ quite a bit. So a lot of people want to that I that when I talk to, they want to locate particular like Native American towns, right? And the reason I put air quotes around towns is because whenever you say that word town or village, people assume and they think of Europeans type towns or villages in which they're permanent. And when you think about a Native American town or village, you want to think of a larger territorial space in which there can be movement within that territorial space that they have ownership over and sovereignty over. Um, Typically, for the Lenape, you're talking about nuclear homes. That might be a bit extended to include maybe grandfathers or someone else, but this is a nuclear home. Um, so that's different from like the Haudenosaunee or Iroquois speaking peoples that are in longhouses. And they can sometimes be um, can like densely settled, but most times it's more of a sort of dispersed settlement over a larger space of land. Um, and those settlements are often seasonal. So October, you would have a different seasonal settlement about a day's walk away for hunting. And if you get to June and July, you're getting into sort of spring planting and harvest. So then there's a movement back. You might also have a fowling season or a fishing season. So there's this seasonal movement patterns. Typically, if you're thinking about the settlement, it's like why Native people settle in the places that they settle. It's not all that different from Europeans. It's water access, drainage, right, and climate. I mean, those are three key resources. So there's a lot of settlement along river systems and forks. That's from both movement and trade and travel, etc. But it's also significant for ceremonial practices, like let's say a sweat lodge, for example, or it's really important for agriculture, etc.
And this land purchase was with the Lenape. What were the major players on the Native American side?
Yeah, so the major players, and you have to realize something when we talk about like the Lenape. The Lenape is a loose confederation of different peoples, clan groups, and so the individual clan groups have their own sachems or chiefs that are really beholden to that particular group. They're not like the Europeans constantly want to call them kings, like they have this overwhelming authority, and they really don't. So it's a very decentralized system of governance. And so if there is a land deal, as in this case, there's no one person that you can go to. There's many people from different clan and kin groups that ultimately have to bring that information back to a whole host of other people to negotiate. So for our purposes, if we're thinking about the walking purchase, it's Nutimus is a very important player in the walking purchase because he lives and has authority over a good chunk of the land that's part of the walking purchase. Manahawkin is another really important player in the walking purchase because he also is in this area of the forks of the Ohio. You have Tishohokan. He was also a pretty important player in terms of the north part of the Lehigh Valley. And so if you're going to make a deal, you have to actually bring this to a host of native leaders.
And have any of these leaders met with the colonials at the time?
Yeah, I mean, they've had several interactions since at least 1682 with colonial leaders in Pennsylvania's case. But if we take Pennsylvania out of the picture, that goes back even farther, right? With Dutch settlements and Swedish settlements and etc. So for this particular case, Nunamus has had a lot of interaction with um, colonial leaders. Just if he was there during some of the original agreements with William Penn. He was there in the 1700 agreement, which gets brought back up through to the walking purchase. That becomes kind of a contested moment. So he has a very good understanding and memory, really, of all of those past agreements that makes some of the claims that colonial leaders are using during this walking purchase suspicious, right? And there's a reason that Nunamus continues to resist. And one of the things I would point out too is when we're thinking about so the walking purchase and have they had interaction with Europeans, is that if we're thinking about the walking purchase itself, it's a series of agreements. So there's a moment in 1737 that we often point to, but there was a similar negotiation in 35, a similar negotiation in 34. So 37 is a continuation of a much longer sort of dialogue and debate over this territory, this area that the Penns so desperately want.
And who are the Pennsylvanians pushing for this purchase?
Well, there's a lot of them pushing for this purchase. Many of them are speculators, but there's also settlers. And there's also the Penn family in particular. So start with the Penn family. William Penn, the founder of Pennsylvania, dies in 1718. And then there's a dispute over who's going to inherit Pennsylvania. Is it going to be from his second wife or from the first wife? And ultimately comes down to John, Thomas, and Richard Penn as the inheritors of Pennsylvania after a little legal dispute. So John, Thomas, and Richard not only inherit Pennsylvania, but they inherit their father's debt. And they are in considerable debt, and they are land poor. This is also providing a little bit of push for the Penns to purchase this land by hook or by crook, because they need to fill their coffers, because it looks like they might actually lose the colony. John Penn just in 1735 gets an offer for 60,000 pounds to purchase Pennsylvania, and he's actually thinking about it. It probably would have went down if Thomas Penn, the sort of middle child, wouldn't have resisted or at least delayed the process. So Pennsylvania could have been sold. So they're looking really at this territory to purchase. And one of the reasons that they see value in that land, so the land in the Lehigh Valley and the forks of the Delaware, is that settlers had already started moving there. You have the Irish tract or Craig's tract, you have Hunter's tract, of squatters, essentially, that were taking advantage of a few years of chaos in the land office after William Penn dies. So you have the Penns that really want this. You have James Logan that really wants this. He has speculative ventures in the forks of the Delaware. He has the Durham tract, which is above what's called Tahican Creek, which is on Nunamus's land. He has an arrangement with Nunamus to use this, but he doesn't have fee simple access to it. Then you have another guy, William Allen, right? William Allen's a major player in Pennsylvania politics and proprietary politics, and he has purchased already from the Penns 20,000 acres in this vicinity, and they haven't even bought it yet. The Penns are selling land above Tahican Creek in the Lehigh Valley before there's even negotiations for those purchases, because, like I said, they are land poor and they are in debt. So those are some key people that really see the value in purchasing this land and getting the Lenape to purchase this land. And they're going to use any means at their disposal to do this.
Can you break down the final agreement between both parties?
The 1737 agreement is an interesting moment because it's hard to say what they both gained, because they walk away with different perspectives of what just happened. So this all starts really in about 1734, when the Penns have arrived. So Thomas Penn has arrived in Pennsylvania. His brother John also arrives because he's trying to shirk his creditors. He thinks he's going to go into debtor's prison. And so he leaves and goes to Pennsylvania. And they're trying to negotiate a land deal with the Lenape, particularly above Tohickon Creek and above what was purchased in 1682. So they have meetings. The first one is in Durham on James Logan's land. Well, it's not really James Logan's land. It's Nonimus's land. That doesn't go well because they tried to articulate that their father, William Penn, had purchased from the Lenape land that was to be sited by a day and a half's walk in 1686. According to a deed that they have that has not been executed, actually has blank spots in it, but they believe that they had paid for, well, they argue that they had already paid the Lenape for, but they had not walked yet. So this is the argument that they're making. Whether that actually occurred or not, it's hard to tell because of the historical record, but it looks like it never did, that this was made up, or at least there was a negotiation for it, and that negotiation never actually worked in the colony's favor or in the Penn's favor. So to achieve what they want, because in 1734 Durham, it doesn't work. The Lenape absolutely refused to sell the forks of the Delaware. Then in 35, they go to Pennsbury Manor on William Penn's old estate. Again, they try to harass Nonimus to sell land. He refuses, and the other leaders refuse. Manahawkin is upset at that meeting as well. He's actually threatening to go to war over it, and Nonimus feels utterly harassed by 1735, and there is just no agreement. In the interim, between 1735 and 37, when the deal is broken down, Thomas Penn just starts selling the land. Surveyors are going out and marketing it. William Allen has already bought 20,000 acres in which he has a right, according to the patents, to start surveying the land, or the warrant to actually survey the land and locate it. They haven't even purchased it yet. In 36, before the 37 agreement, the Penns orchestrate a lottery in Pennsylvania in which they believe that they're going to make $15,000, 15,000 pounds, by selling tracts of land, 500-acre tracts in the forks of the Delaware. This is really problematic, obviously, and they realize that they're not going to make any real money on this unless they can give people free and clear title to this land. So, what do? In 1737, they start negotiating again, and they use a bit of trickery. The first thing that they do is they explain that to Nonimus and others who are questioning, like, what are the boundaries of this purchase that you're requesting? Like, what are the limits of this? Because they are experiencing those settlers, they're experiencing those surveyors, and etc. So what James Logan and other officials do, particularly Andrew Hamilton, who devises this map, they have a sort of rough drawn map in which it looks as if the walk is going to take place from the Delaware River up sort of like the Neshamie Creek to what is called Tohickon Creek, because the map takes Neshamie Creek and makes it huge, and it would reach almost up to Tohickon, if that makes sense. But they label that creek, that Tohickon Creek, they label it the west branch of the Delaware, which is essentially the Lehigh River. Lehigh River is nowhere near the Neshamie Creek, so they have manipulated the map to make it look to their Native American or Lenape leaders and negotiators as if all they want is to go from the old spruce tree and the Delaware River up to Tohickon Creek, which they are totally willing to negotiate and sell. What they don't realize is they've just signed away a 1.5-day walk all the way up to the Lehigh River, which takes in the forks of the Delaware and all of the land north of Tohickon Creek. So they walk away thinking that they have basically agreed to something that was already kind of established back in like 1700. And Nonimus was there too at that agreement. And they walk away with the promises of compensation and gifts. They also walk away with another crucial promise. Thomas Penn agrees that they shall have use access to the land that they've just sold, so they can continue to use and hunt and live on this land. And that is a verbal agreement that is made in 37. However, in the deed, so now I'm going to talk about what the Pennsylvanians get out of it. What the Pennsylvanians get out of it is that, and the Penns in particular, and Logan, is that this is going to be much more north and east than Tohickon Creek. It's going to encompass over a territory larger than Rhode Island. They're also going to get the quit claim to the entire area, because in the deed that they mark, which is different from the verbal agreement, those Native Americans no longer get use rights. They have to quit claim the property, that area, and leave. And they are barred, it says literally in the language, debarred from ever living there again. So they have signed something that was fundamentally different to what they were told in the verbal agreement and agreed to. So these are where we get the sort of dispute over the walking purchase.
A unique factor in this purchase is the actual walking process to measure land ownership. Is that a common practice with Native Americans?
Yeah, it's a common practice for Native Americans. I mean, think of it this way. Even when they go on for hunting season, they typically measure where they're going in the days or time that it takes to get there. That walk, usually when it's a standard unit of measurement, is supposed to be at a leisurely pace. And this is how they would negotiate a land sale. Along with I should say this too, although they say walk, right, at a leisurely pace, they're also making clear distinctions of the natural geography or topography. So it's not just like walk wherever you want. They're also pointing out, like on maps, the topography of an area. So you can walk to here and that takes a day or a 1.5 days.
From a Native American's perspective, what occurred on September 19th, the day of the walk?
They call it the hurry walk. And the reason they call it the hurry walk is that the James Logan contacts the local sheriff of Bucks County, and he has him hire the 3 fastest runners in the province. They're going to cover that 1.5 day walk, and the fastest, the one that goes the farthest, will be the one that decides how far that is. I think he goes 60 miles in that 1.5 days. The walk is sort of interesting because, and this is not often brought up about the walking purchase, that route has already been traced, and it was traced back in 1735. They actually did a trial run in 1735 to see how far they could go. And once they did the trial run, then they were able to clear parts of that path so that this person would have a clear shot to the Lehigh River, which then they could take perpendicular over to the east, which gives them the forks of the Delaware. Only one of the runners actually makes it that entire way to that 60 miles. His name is Edward Marshall. Yeah, Edward Marshall's the one that actually finishes the run. So the three fastest runners in the colony, it was Edward Marshall, Solomon Jennings, and James Yeats. They had to run this pre-prepared trail essentially, but only Marshall makes it, and that's actually a significant moment and significant fact for what happens later.
And after your extensive research on this event of the walking purchase, what are your major takeaways?
I think for me, some of the major takeaways from what happens is that we start to see the sort of financial situation. We see the real financial situation that the Penns are in because of the debts that their father had taken on in an experiment that he thought would be lucrative, but it was essentially not. Another takeaway is we see just the power of land speculation in determining outcomes. Three, I think we see the importance of native nations and native lands to the history of the colony and how the colony is established, and really the foundations of the country, right? Because what happens here, if we just look at it as a snapshot and we're like, okay, here's 1737 in which the Lenape are swindled. I mean, literally swindled out of a great deal of land, which was still in the courts 2004. If we end it there and say, oh, well, the walk happens, there's a displacement, particularly after 1742, that doesn't mean that history and that experience in those negotiations didn't have an impact down the road that significantly shaped the trajectory of Pennsylvania's history.
We've been speaking with Christopher Pearl, Chair of the History Department at Lycoming College. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
From
Listeners
a Native
like you
American's
make
perspective,
PCN
what
programming
occurred
possible.
on September
Full episodes
19th,
of
the day of
PCN's
the
history
walk?
and culture content, like the interview
They
you
call
just
it the
heard,
Hurry
are
Walk.
available to stream with the PCN
And the reason they
Select
call it the
app.
Hurry Walk is
Explore
that
other documentary programs, event
James
coverage,
Logan
and a
contacted
lot
the local
more.
sheriff in
To learn more about
Bucks County,
PCN's mission
and he has
to
them hire
support
the three
PCN with a
fastest
donation,
runners in the
visit
province.
PCNTV.com. This link
They're
and others
going to
can be found in
cover
our show
that day and
notes.
a half
We
walk.
appreciate your support.
And the